Welcome to The Criminologist, the podcast dedicated to educating and entertaining our listeners. We bring you subject matter experts from around the world and share the latest and greatest evidence-based practices and interventions to help individuals desist from a life of crime and delinquency. This podcast avoids stereotypes and biases in favor of the lived experiences of those we can best learn from. Now, please welcome the host of The Criminologist, Joseph Arvidsson.
Hello, and welcome to episode 102 of The Criminologist podcast. Happy to have you all with us today. I am so pleased to announce the return of one of my all-time favorite guests here on the Criminologist podcast. Speaking of my good friend, Eddie Flanagan. Eddie is a freelance artist who uses the media of art to digitally describe life's journey, covering many subjects, including his own journey from and through addiction and also rehabilitation after a long and varied prison life in the UK. Eddie is now a prison reformer, striving to guide others in recovery to a healthy life's walk. Eddie spent much of his life in England's criminal justice system, and after 20 years of imprisonment and 35 years of addiction, he is now a freelance artist behind Edd the Head Flanagan, a YouTube channel, and so much more. So with no further ado, I bring you my second conversation with Eddie Flanagan, and I will see you all on the other side. Welcome back to the show, Eddie. This is your second visit to the Criminologist podcast. For those listeners who may not have caught our first interview, why don't you reintroduce yourself? Just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and your journey, your pathways that have led us to this very moment.
Right. My name's Eddie Flanagan. I've got a community interest company called Edd the Head Animations. It's a non-profit organization. I create digital content around issues that I've experienced in my life, such as dyslexia, criminality, addiction, childhood abuse, speaking out about childhood abuse. All those issues are quite difficult. So I approach it as an artist. I make very short videos and then I put them onto social media. The other side of it is this year I'm going into schools and prisons. I will show one of my animations because none of them are longer than 3 minutes. So that gives people the SP without me boring them to death. And then I'll have a conversation that's agreed on before with whoever the event holder is. I will deliver that free. I don't charge for it. I don't want anyone to not be able to access what I do because there's a fee involved. That's why I've started a non-profit company. I work with police. I work with the Scottish Police Service at the moment. I'm doing an art design thing for custody suites in Scotland. I work with others who do the same thing as me, people who've got lived experience. I was a career criminal to the age of 50. I had quite a traumatic childhood, age 14, 15, made bad decisions, stopped going to school because my dyslexia wasn't diagnosed. Lots of other stuff had happened. And I went off the rails into addiction in big time and into crime. Ended up serving 20 years in total. The largest sentence being about 6 years. But I was always in trouble when I was in prison. I'd always lose my remission. I'd get into fights, quite serious acts of violence, because it is what it is. You're in a prison with the worst 1% of anyone's population, and everyone's naughty, so it's going to kick off now and again. So by the time I was 50, I'd experienced a lot. But what changed it for me was a teacher at the age of 30, whilst I was in prison, saying, I think you're dyslexic. And that gave me an insight and an understanding of why some of the difficulties that I had, because when I was going to school, as a dyslexic in England, and this because I went to secondary school in 1969. That's how old I am. Anyway, you did written exams once a year. There was you didn't get any credit for whatever you did during the year, and you had to sit down in about 3 hours. That how long the test lasted, and you were assessed for the year. Now, if you're underdiagnosed dyslexic, everyone telling you that you're not paying attention when you know they are. Everyone praising you for being intelligent, so therefore you must be lazy. Get to the back of the class. When that's reinforced constantly, you start to feel like that as a kid. Because I studied psychology, and a student of Freud was Jung, and he recognised that our behavioural experiences as children are cognitive, and they say the child is the father of the man, and that was certainly true in my case because the child was scared. I come from a really big family, 8 kids, 6 boys, 2 girls. Unfortunately, my dad weren't around. I won't go into that, but he was an alcoholic, so I didn't have any positive role models. I had an amazing mother, though, and brothers and sisters. So even though my mum was bringing up 8 kids on her own, basically, until the older of my siblings were man enough to say to my dad that we're not having this. Anyway, so they sorted that out. And I remember that they're my formative years of when all that, because my dad was a drunk, so there'd be violent situations between him and my older brothers sticking up for my mum or the kids, and rightly so. If I'd have been old enough, anyway. So all these things, and not only that, because I think positive role models are so important in our childhood, especially, I'm not saying especially male or female, but I'm going to talk about male now because I didn't really have any positive role models. I'm not saying I'm a role model. I'm not. I'm not an example. I'm a warning. I don't pretend to be what I'm not. I was involved in crime to the age of 50. I'm 64 now. So that's a long time away from criminality. I did 10 years as an outreach worker in my own community in Manchester, working with people who were so ill and so sick and so far off the radar of normal society that they couldn't even get to day centres, because I worked with churches and day centres, and I fed people who were homeless, worked with the homeless in Manchester, Piccadilly Gardens. If you don't know it in America, it's an experience. Anyway, so I just want to pass on the lessons that I've learned, and they don't have to go through the trauma. I'm not saying that by what I do, I will stop somebody making the same mistakes as me, but gives you food for thought, and that's what we do.
You mentioned giving back, Eddie, and you mentioned the research around psychology, and we always look at desistance on this program. There's this theme of what they term generativity or wishing to give back. Do you find, present tense, that helps with your process as well? Again, this sort of giving back, letting others benefit from your experiences?
Yeah. Well, this is my personal opinion. I'm in recovery. I'm 11 and a half years sober. I'm 16 years away from my offending. So I've been doing this for a few years now. So that gives me credibility. I use art because it was my pathway out of criminality. Somebody else's pathway who had similar experiences to mine do podcasts. And that's their pathway out. I'm not knocking that. I don't glamorize any of my offending because there's victims to every single one of my offences, and I have to respect that. I've referenced my past and what I went through, but really I talk about the last 16 years and my pathway out, and then hopefully some people might say, oh, actually, that's not a bad idea. So, yeah.
Yeah, I could not have said it better myself, and you hit the nail on the head there. There are, just as there are multiple pathways into criminality and addiction, there are multiple pathways out. And that's one thing that this program is all about, is sharing and enlightening folks to those various pathways. So let's talk about your art and maybe focus on that. I'm a big fan, as you alluded to this earlier. You produce these short 3-minute videos or so, but let's maybe start at the beginning. How did you first even stumble into knowing that you had a proclivity or a talent for this artwork, Eddie? How did this all start?
There's only been a couple of constants throughout my life. Most things have been very chaotic due to the life that I led. But art was always there. But when I wasn't in prison, there was too much going on, either in childhood or as my addiction started. But when I went to prison for the first time, I taught myself how to play guitar. I got a book because I wanted to write songs. I didn't want to learn to play the guitar to entertain other people. I wanted to find a creative process. So I did that. I'm also creative in the sense that I can draw. So from first day, really, I went to prison. I did a portrait of somebody's child, I think it was. And then word soon gets around if you're a good artist. So in the 20 years that I spent in the prison system, I did art all the time because the staff and the inmates all wanted to buy my art. So whatever the currency was on the black market or legal within the prison system, I had a bountiful supply. So that gave me an independence because in prison you have to work to earn your money. It's different now. You can have private cash and everything, but I'm going back to sort of like first went to jail in 1975, 3 months Borstal. Then I did a 6 months to 2 years. Oh, just endless sentences that added up to 20 years. But for those 20 years, because I had my own income, I could do the lowest paid job, which was education. So, and they don't even have that availability now because it's changed. So not many people do it. One, because they want to earn enough money to keep them because that's your life while you're in there. So, and it was very limited what you got and what you could spend it on, but they were worth working for. So not many people did education. I could do that. So I created art, and a teacher, when I was 30, recognised my dyslexia in one of the classrooms, and my fear of written work went away because there was an explanation to why I process stuff differently to other people. Dyslexia is a blessing to me. It's a gift. It's not a hindrance, not a label. It's a diagnosis. And we think out of the box, us dyslexics. So I won't bore you with it, but some of our greatest artists and, philosophers are dyslexic. 12% of our population is dyslexic. About 5% is diagnosed. So that's not many people know they're dyslexic. And so they're treated as though they're not thick, but they're not paying attention. They are. They just don't express themselves like you do. So getting a diagnosis is really important. So I make videos about that. I just make videos about what I'm passionate about.
Connect the dots from how you utilized art when you were incarcerated to, again, and I'll leave some links in the description of this episode so folks can experience what I've experienced with the artwork, to some of these amazing videos, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but you at least started just creating these on your telephone, correct?
Yeah, I'm still doing it today. I've just started my company, so now I'm going to upgrade and I'm going to get professional equipment and stuff because there's been so much reaction to the stuff I do that I saw that I could make an impression in the fields that I'm interested in and which we've talked about before. So about 8 years ago, let me start at the beginning. 11 and a half years ago when I got sober, for the first time in my life, I started to create on the outside. Unfortunately, at the same time, my hands became crippled by a bone disease. I've got 2 bone disorders. One's rheumatoid arthritis, and the other one is called drifting. That's where your bones go sideways, basically. So I could no longer draw, but for the first time I felt like drawing and not being incarcerated. So I learned early on in my recovery, if there's a hurdle, find a way around it. Because recovery is philosophy. My attitude will dictate the outcome of anything I enter into. So I thought, right, there's a digital world out there. And if my finger touches a screen, that means that I can create something. So I studied digital technology at the grand old age of 60. I'm 64 now. And I just self-taught myself. Put some stuff together, did a couple of bits for friends. It got noticed. And I haven't looked back since, to be quite honest. But that's because other people that are doing what I'm doing that have been doing this sort of stuff, restorative justice stuff. I'm going to name drop you. It might mean something to people, it might not. People along the way, there's a guy, Gethin Jones. He's an inspirational speaker. You know him. So I saw a video of his when I went on LinkedIn, which is a format we both belong to. And I thought, wow, that's cool. And roughly at the same time, Rose Evans came into my life. She worked for a government organisation that's to do with the structure of prisons and stuff called NACRO. Rose Evans, amazing woman. So I worked with her, and she believed in me. She saw something in me. She went, Eddie, blah, blah, blah. So, and there's other people. My best friend, John Reed, I've known him for just over a year now, but he's got a community interest company. He goes into prisons. He teaches poetry. I animate that poetry. He also does everything within his community because that's his heart. So it's an amazing journey. And it's just, I just work with amazing people. They inspire me by telling me that they like my stuff and keep going. So yeah, it's cool. It's not work. This is my life now, and that's what recovery is about. I didn't get sober to be miserable. Yeah, so I'm just seeing where my artistic potential takes me. So, and if nobody watches it, I'm still going to do it because it's my therapy. The stuff I used to drink and use on and try to suppress, I express that now through what I call conversation pieces, the things I do at the moment. But later on in the year, I'm working with Film Crew for You. We start filming a short film in June for the Recovery Festival in November. More details to follow. Film Crew for You, amazing company. As I said, I'm working with the Scottish Police Service, doing an art design thing with them. As part of that, we've got funding for me to deliver a project at one police station as part of a team, my design, with local artists and involving the local community. So all these things make me get up early in the morning, like you, get a cup of tea, bang, I hit that button, and I'm up 5, 6 o'clock every morning. I'm up to about 12 o'clock at night, and I love it.
Mm-hmm. I love talking to you, Eddie, because it really it breathes life into all of the reading and the research I do around desistance from crime, and it takes those abstract or semi-abstract concepts and like I said, you blow 3 dimensions and 3-dimensional aspects to it. So, for example, one of the things that the literature in desistance talks about is the building up of one's social capital. In other words, individuals who will afford you opportunities in life. And when you talked about LinkedIn, I've come to start using LinkedIn as an example of social capital. I'll tell my students or whomever wants to listen to me, listen, it's like building your LinkedIn page. But it's like building your social capital. It just opens up these opportunities. And I take the same attitude you do with your art, where it's just sort of cathartic with me in this podcast. I sometimes tell myself, I don't really care about the analytics or the downloads. It's just, I use it to build my social capital and broaden my horizons. And as far as I'm concerned, have these great one-on-one conversations with you and see what opportunities this leads to, or have a great conversation with Gethin Jones and see what opportunity that leads to. So yeah, I just love it. It looks like you've really taken advantage.
Better than digging a hole for a living. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I just couldn't physically do it. But yeah.
Well, it's like you say, you find a job you love and you'll never work a day the rest of your life.
Yeah, love that saying. And the thing is, social media is always put down because there's lots of crap comes from it, but there's a lot of inspirational stuff comes from it. And I firmly believe that we're influenced by the company that we keep and the environment we live in. And these are hard-earned lessons. I know how to be naughty. I was really good at it. Being good's harder, but I'm even better at it. That's the crazy thing, because I found a spiritual path for myself. I'm in recovery. My sobriety is every day for me. It's not something I think about. It's what I live. And it's in place because I no longer keep those demons locked away in there trying to burst out and mess my life up. I talk about them, and it's cathartic. And I know that I can teach this to other people. So when I'm working with Film Crew for You in June, Billy, big shout out to Billy, he gets people on that are in recovery, whether they're involved in the film world or not, and he brings them on board his projects, because Billy's also, like me, he's a recovering alcoholic. He's got a few years of sobriety. He's got an amazing spirit. So that'd be a joint venture. And I want to then be able to come back with the skills, because Billy's going to teach me about filming, because I'm an animator at the moment. I'm not a filmmaker, but I am going to be. That's what I'm studying to be. And it's all fun. So, yeah, long may it last. Bring it on.
You mentioned Film Crew for You, and I think we've agreed.
I love them.
We agreed offline that when that June date approaches, I'll have you and hopefully Billy back on to really talk about that project some more. I love what you said about the friends we keep. I forget who said it. It was a recent guest, but I love their quote. They said, "You show me your friends, I'll show you your future." And I think that is so true.
That was me. I'll take credit for that. Boom. I need to off someone else, though. I have to be honest.
It could have been you. We speak all the time. It could have been you. So I'll give you that credit. Yeah. So, hey.
If something sticks in my brain or sticks in your brain, like a saying that you really relate to, then regurgitate it. Yeah.
Yeah. I just think it's so true. Again, it's all about that social capital. We also talk about resiliency in the desistance literature, which you said, speaking of yourself earlier, that you'll just sort of stick your head down and push through on any project. Has that served you well? This, again, sort of sense of tenacity and resiliency in your recovery and reintegration process, Eddie?
Yeah. I had a conversation today with another guy who, like me, comes from a really rough background, Ezekiel King. He's also on LinkedIn. Check him out. Amazing guy. He's an author. He's just a cool dude. And we had a conversation today, and it lifted me. It lifted my spirit. And hopefully I've done the same for other people today if I've come into contact with them, because we keep what we've got by giving it away. It's an old 12-step saying in recovery, AA and NA. Whatever your addiction could be, you could be addicted to sex. God knows I've had all of them. But then again, I was very greedy and hedonistic. And as I said, I was good at being naughty. But the fun is now that I can laugh about that, put it into context and use it to educate somebody. Yeah, I'm proud of my work. I'm not precious about what I do. What I do is whatever opportunity brings forward. And I believe in creating my opportunities, not waiting for them to happen. So I read somewhere very recently, if you're waiting for life to get better before you get happy, and question mark. So, yeah, get on with it today. We're all going to deal with stuff, and it's hard. And people say to me, "Oh, you're always cheerful." I'm not always cheerful, but when I'm down and I'm sad and I'm dealing with stuff, I do that behind closed doors or with my family. I come from a big family, as I said, and we buried 5 siblings. We're shortly going to bury my sister 9 months after losing my little brother. You know what I mean? So we know about grief, we know about loss, but we also know about family and support, because throughout my checkered career, my big sister Peg always believed in me. Always. I saw the way she treated her family and people, and yeah.
Let's give a shout out to, you mentioned Edd the Head Animations. If there's listeners out there saying, "Hey, I want to check out some of this crazy artwork," how can they go about tracking down content from Edd the Head Animations?
Go on YouTube, type in Edd the Head Flanagan. Flanagan is spelled Flanagan. Edd the Head Flanagan, and you'll see my conversation pieces. Please comment. I love praise, but I learn more from critique. Yeah.
And as you mentioned, we're both on LinkedIn. Folks can reach out and connect with us on LinkedIn as well. As mentioned, Eddie, I'm going to have you back on to talk about Film Crew for You as the start date of that project approaches. But it's always fun to catch up with you, Eddie. I appreciate it. I enjoy your enthusiasm. It's contagious, my friend.
Thank you, brother.
All right.
Thank you. Stay strong.
We'll talk very soon, Eddie. Take care.
Yeah, take care. God bless, brother.
A big criminologist thank you to Edd Flanagan of Edd the Head Animations. I am going to leave a couple of links to some of Eddie's YouTube videos. I encourage you all to not just check them out, but also subscribe to Eddie's channel and support him on his journey of growth here. I love having folks like Ed on the show. It's what the Criminologist podcast is all about, examining both the empirical data, which we have at our disposal and which is indispensable, but also looking at the process from the lens of those who have actually walked that pathway, such as Edd Flanagan. Again, get a nice, well-rounded approach to the desistance process. I will have Ed back as noted this summer when he updates us on his new project working with Film Crew for You. Billy Stevenson may join us as well, fingers crossed, but as you can hear, Ed is expanding his knowledge base and evolving from the music videos, the short videos he's creating now, getting into filmmaking. So kudos to you, Eddie. Look forward to watching from the sidelines as that next chapter in your life takes off. We will be back next week with a fresh episode. I'm excited to announce we're going to be talking about neurocriminology. So if there are any of you students out there looking to get into the field, you might want to check out this episode next week and see if you might want to be a future neurocriminologist. Some really fun stuff on next week's episode. In the meantime, you may contact the show or reach out to us through our website, theparagongroupllc.com, for training or presentations as to evidence-based practices, implementation, program design, or of course, the topic of desistance from crime. If you have questions or comments as to this podcast, feel free to contact the show via our email of thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. That's thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. Remember to follow us through our Facebook and Instagram pages at The Criminologist Podcast. New fun images are being added all the time to those feeds. You don't want to miss out. The Criminologist Media Group is also on Twitter. You can follow us at Crim Media Group. That's CRIM Media Group. Go ahead and give us a follow. You may connect with me, Joseph Arvidsson, or Eddie Flanagan on LinkedIn, and follow both the Criminologist Podcast and the Paragon Group on our LinkedIn pages. Lastly, if you've not already done so, check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Criminologist, for additional content as to the themes of this program. Merchandise is available. Reach out to the show if you are interested. And if you believe in what we're doing on the program, if you're part of the movement, please spread the word. Tell a friend or a coworker or a colleague about us. Ask them to subscribe to the podcast. And of course, do so yourself if you've not already done so. And always remember, folks, there's no them, there's only us.
it is what it is. You're in a prison with the worst 1% of anyone's population, and everyone's naughty, so it's going to kick off now and again.
The Criminologist podcast is a production of the Paragon Group, LLC. For speaking engagements, interviews, program design, or training opportunities, please visit us at theparagongroup.llc.com. If you enjoyed the show, you can find more content and videos on our YouTube channel, The Criminologist. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Both the Criminologist podcast and the Criminologist channel are brought to you by the Criminologist Media Group. Be sure to give us a 5-star review, and thanks for listening.
The thoughts, statements, and opinions of the host and cast members do not necessarily reflect the views of their employers and are those of the host and cast themselves. Any discussion regarding client statements, behaviors, actions, or crimes are purely fictional and are used only for the purposes of example. Any examples that could be deemed to be related to an actual individual or individuals are incidental.